Hello, Paul. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Always nice to reconnect. You must be extraordinarily busy in the current period, and the topic of today is really about opening the Lausanne VII event and inspiring our community of partners in doing the right thing for Alzheimer's patients. So I'm only going to touch a little bit on vaccines, and I know how vaccines are high on the agenda. But before we go there, because there are certainly some parallels, I'd like to understand in the current context where we have seen so many global multinational pharmaceutical companies exit the dementia research space. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you optimistic? And in a way, why do you think J&J should stay in that field and continue to actively research?
Yeah, as a healthcare company, an old healthcare company, since more than 130 years we exist, we have always been focused on the actual clinical challenges in the world. And so at the moment, as we know, I just highlighted, we are working on vaccines for COVID. We have been working on cancer. We are working on dementia since a long time. And as dementia is one of the major challenges worldwide, with people getting older and more it becomes a pandemic, that is a very important reason for us to stay in. It's because there is a high medical need. It will continue to be a high medical need, even grow, and it will have impact on every family, society, on the economy. And that's where it's important that we, as a large healthcare company, continue to stay in and try to harness the best possible science to make progress in Alzheimer.
And have you seen developments in the past few years, Paul, that led you to believe that ultimately there will be a return to investors in that particular space?
Yeah, I think we made steady progress. Yeah, it's a very long road because dementia is a very slow degenerative disease, and it's very difficult to study. So, but progress was made on imaging, on biomarkers, on blood biomarkers, on other types of biomarkers to diagnose early. We put ourselves on the track to try to prevent progression in dementia and to prevent dementia, because when people get to the stage of dementia, it's in fact too late. You can't rework the degeneration. And that's where early intervention is important. And we made a lot of progress on that part. Also on clinical trial networks, on learning. While we learn about the biomarkers, while we learn about the progress, clinical trials have been set up to study that, and it gives us good insight on how to bring people into clinical trials and learn. So, and new targets, a lot of new targets came to the front. Tau is one of them, and we are focusing on, and we know that there might be good progress there. So there is progress. It's slow. Only few companies, few institutions work on it, especially there are also very few biotechs who work on it. But I think with a renewed effort and an accelerated path to results with a good coordination, there might be a possibility to make much more progress in the next 10 years than we made in the last 10 years.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring. And talking about acceleration, I think obviously we think about those Alzheimer's patients that have been suffering for many years, and they see in the past 1 year that there is a path forward developing a COVID-19 vaccine in less than 1 year, when it took probably more than a decade in average for previous vaccines. Obviously, we've seen the news on recent news on Pfizer and Moderna yesterday. We wish you well. You have a proven viral vector technology that's going to be put at work. I hope very soon. You're running a massive 50,000, I would not call them patient, but subject clinical trial on your own COVID-19 vaccine. All of that is going extremely fast. Are there lessons we could learn from your experience that could be applied to accelerate the development of therapeutics for Alzheimer's?
Yeah, there are definitely significant lessons to be learned. But first, the difference between a virus and Alzheimer is quite significant, while it also will still be quite different in timelines. So a virus we can identify, we can take it out of the human, put it into animal models. We know since we started working on HIV, Zika, Ebola, RSV, influenza, we know how to tackle viruses, and all these technologies exist. We had to mobilize them and bring them together and work significantly faster than we did before. But it was a proven path which we used before and where we could step on now to get this done. Same platforms, similar technology, only faster with much more resources. In Alzheimer, dementia, the challenge is that we have good insights, but not good enough to know and really understand why the degeneration is happening. And so science, the basic science, is one of the most critical things which need to continue to be invested in to get to new targets, new pathways, and understand better how we can step in there. And I think with the World Dementia Council and the Dementia Discovery Fund, there are new targets now. I think more than 17 have been put on a path to learning. And several of them will fail, but one day a few of them will succeed and will give a new starting point for developing new drugs for dementia. So I think but what we learned in COVID is that by coordinating and in full transparency, sharing between all of the companies, the investigators, the NIH, the FDA, working together with everyone, we were able to bring such a vaccine extremely highly needed in the world in less than 12 months. Yeah? And that meant day in, day out working 24/7, a significant coordination by everyone involved. Regulators, they react and much appreciation. Some of the files come back within 2 hours, within 24 hours, within a week if needed, but most of the interaction is direct. As we feed the data out of the preclinical work, the animal work, and the clinical works in phase 1, 2, the regulators review them ad hoc when they get them, and we get permission to do the next step within 24 hours. That has been instrumental in moving fast. The sharing of information, the learning between the different companies, between the different institutions, there was an immediate transparency of all results. And we tried to make them as comparable as possible by using same methodologies, similar type of testing to be able to say, hey, that's what we need to do to get to results. And so that learning, which came to different collaborations in the world, I think we can learn from that we can do things faster. And especially when it comes to diseases with such a high medical need on a global basis. I think the learning should be evaluated and the good pieces should be put in place for dementia.
And you see an opportunity to mobilize such a similar ecosystem in support of Alzheimer's research?
Yeah, there is absolutely, I think, going to be the openness and the willingness to do that, as everyone knows that the pandemic of dementia is having impact on the world economically, on families, on society, and being able to prevent and have healthy longevity as a goal here. Also, healthy brain longevity is going to be so much better for so many people. And it's a longer road, but I'm convinced we can get it done and continue to work while we continue to work on this.
Thank you. Well, we hope the Davos Alzheimer Collaborative will be an instrument to actually precisely facilitate what you just offered as a solution. And Paul, you have been a driving force back to 2016. You spent so many hours on the creation of Steppy in multiple meetings and settings and thinking moments, and ultimately launched Steppy together in January 2017 in Davos. And ever since, every year, you generously offer an anniversary moment to Steppy in Davos. So you have learned a lot from Steppy, and Steppy is not perfect. Steppy can always do better, but CEPI is certainly very important, together with Gavi in the management of COVAX. Now, when you look at the Davos Alzheimer Collaborative, where you're led with the same energy, where do you think we can draw parallel for CEPI? If we were going to learn from CEPI, are there things you would do in a similar fashion or differently?
I think we have to learn from CEPI. It's a vehicle which is set up for a very specific objective, and it's to bring viruses which are of a potential of making it into a pandemic into the state that they can be tested in the next round when there is an outbreak. And about 20 of these viruses were selected. Different CEPI funded different companies, universities, and groups to start working on this with a lot of progress. And that basic work got us ready now for COVID. Yeah, a lot of work like MERS is also a coronavirus, and MERS was into that portfolio. And several of the companies were able to pre-work already on MERS and learn from that, where they had to go to make a vaccine. So that's where CEPI, a very special vehicle for pandemic preparedness, was set up. If we go to dementia, we have to look into what are the good things we learned there, and the type of funding, the way it was funding, the way it's governed. I think for this one, we need to review on who should be at the table to govern the basic research. A lot of basic research needs to happen. So larger institutions in the world, government should commit to fund their academics in order to be able to do research in the space. Groups like the NIH, also the IMI version, the IMI in Europe, other groups in Japan, around the world. We should get a good basic, which, by the way, is ongoing, but should be better funded and accelerated. I think there should be a new biotech world around. If there is a good future market, the biotech can thrive on this and let biotech co-invest. There is a small initiative, as I mentioned earlier, the Dementia Discovery Fund, which is now around $350 million initiative. Do that times 3, 4, and the probability of success will be multiplied for getting to dementia. And then the large companies have to step in and using their power, like we do now with COVID, on accelerating and using our research organizations in the world and put them in action to support this. We have at the moment several thousand people in parallel working on clinical trials, upscaling, manufacturing to get it all done in 1 year. If we have a very good Alzheimer drug, we will do the same for that. Like now, we do all the time with cancer. We have the way to go from first in human to outcomes within 2 years. Alzheimer is a slow disease. The clinical trials will take longer, but if you put the acceleration part we put on the oncology, we can get to Alzheimer drugs in 4 or 5 years if there is a good basis to work from.
Oh, very, very, very remarkable. 4 or 5 years would be remarkable.
Once you have a candidate which can be selected to go into the clinic, it should be possible with the right systems to evaluate it in 4 or 5 years.
Very, very good. And by the way, Paul, that's a little bit what you facilitate. I think you're running at J&J what I believe to be the largest healthcare incubator, and that's interesting for us to learn about that, because one of the work streams of the Davos Alzheimer Collaborative is precisely about enabling better, faster clinical trial with the right platforms. So is there anything we can learn from your experience as you run the incubator that could precisely guide the way we can think about that platform for clinical trials?
The incubator, which is for early science, where we have JLabs. We today have around 500 companies and incubators, and it's open for we select or we open it up to very good science in fields where we can add something. And so we work with the companies to progress their science faster, but they are independent companies and they raise their own money, but by adding capabilities from the company, it goes fast. And we have a few examples where, for example, in Toronto, we have a company called Winterlight Labs, and that uses AI to analyze speech and language patterns to detect and monitor cognitive and mental disease. We have another company in Lab Central in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is developing treatments targeted on microglia. That's Tiaki Therapeutics. And then in San Diego, we have another one working on looking at inflammation of as a source for a solution, because it looks like dementia involves inflammation, and they're focused on that. And that's Vivrio on Biosciences. So we have several companies, I just named 3, which came out of academic environment. We facilitate it and we give the opportunity to prove or to move forward, and also help them raise money. So it's not just that it all has to be organized top down. I think it has to be facilitated bottom up. People who have interest and who have great ideas should be facilitated to bring their ideas forward. And that's what we do at J&J with our external innovation engine. It's making sure that bright minds in the world who have a mission and a focus, and we can use such a platform, and other companies can use it to bring forward science and evaluate and join in the effort.
Thank you very much. And I've got a last question for you, and it's going back in your days where you have been, I think, one of the first scientists to bring to the world treatment for HIV patients. I think you were the first one, right?
I was not the first one, but I was amongst the first, let's say. Yeah.
Amongst the first, okay. And but in that particular period, obviously, research was motivated by certainly a possible return, the desire to do good, but also there was a very, very strong advocacy campaign at that point in time, led by patients groups and a relatively young population that could be mobilized fairly rapidly. Now we're talking about a very, very different population. It's not going to be the same type of advocacy. So if DAC was going to also serve as an advocacy instrument, what do you think should be the right way of organizing that?
Yeah, the HIV was remarkable that it was very comparable to COVID. It was a new infection going around the world, affecting a lot of people, young people, and sometimes very vulnerable people also in the developing world. And so it was like seen as this could be a real massive challenge for the world. And that's where people, young scientists like me, we jumped on it because we thought we can do something about this. But then what changed was that the activists, the people who were affected by the disease and their friends and family, started to work on the government and the regulations that things should go much faster. Yeah? And in the beginning, we counted deaths. Our first clinical trials was comparing placebo and active and count the number of people dying. Very quickly, we found the biomarker, the HIV viral load, as the driver for, if you had a high viral load, high risk of dying. Yeah? And so very quickly that was established. And so based on that biomarker, now you could do trials of 6 months instead of waiting for people to die in measuring the number of deaths. We could measure viral load. And with that, very quickly, we had like 20 new drugs, and people started to use combinations and suddenly said, wow, this combination stopped the progress of the disease. And we were amongst the first to administer triple combinations, and that we show was breakthrough. And that was around 94, 95. And while the first, let's say, 10 years, people had no chance of surviving. From when we had 3 drugs we could give together, many of these people are still alive today. Yeah, and that's now 20, 25 years later. Yeah? And that is where we can have a lot of learning on the activism, driving the regulators to go to biomarkers, allowing combinations fast, accelerating clinical trials, pushing the companies, all of that was done by the activist community and resulted in very fast developments. And so if we go and we would be able to mobilize that, then here we have to go to the family of Alzheimer and dementia patients. Of course, the patients themselves can't do that. And families who have been suffering, including my own family, we have had people with Alzheimer in my family. And once you have lived through that, you know what a challenge it is and that you have to do something about it. And that's where I think we should go. It's motivating the people who with living with Alzheimer in their family as the drivers to do the activism. And yeah, I think everyone is aware of it, but being able to mobilize those will really help to accelerate.
Thank you very, very much. I think we're getting to the end of our time today. I think with your insights, we will be well equipped to actually progress the discussion over the next 2 days as part of this Lausanne VII event. Before we end that conversation, Paul, is there any particular message you want to give to participants to the conference?
I think we should learn as much as possible from other evolutions in science and bringing new medicines forward, and bring that to the practicality of what can we do in the dementia and make it very specific for that. Think hard who should be part of shaping this future network and continue to change and shape and mobilizing the community as well as the governments and making them aware or including them in awareness that this is a pandemic, not fast like COVID, but a very slow but very significant pandemic in the world, which is not caused by an infectious agent but by age, and it's a neurodegenerative disease with significant economic impact also. And if you don't do it for the economic impact, let's do it for the human being themselves, because they deserve good treatments for dementia.
Thank you very, very much, Paul. Thanks for your lead, and folks, thanks for your participation to the event. Thanks for your contribution, and see you very soon.
Arnaud, my pleasure, and thanks for your leadership driving this event.
Thank you.